Oakland, California, March 1992. The tattoo needle buzzed in Demetrius' hand as he looked at the young man sitting in his chair. 21-year-old Tupac Shakur had just removed his shirt, revealing a torso that would soon carry two words across it. Two words that would change music history forever. But what nobody in that room knew, not even the tattoo artist preparing the ink, was that these weren't just words. They were a weapon. A 5-letter acronym that would expose the entire system. And when Tupac finally revealed what those letters really stood for, the world would never look at him the same way again. "You sure about this?" Demetrius asked, studying the sketch one more time. "That's permanent, man. That's your whole stomach." Tupac didn't blink. "I've never been more sure about anything." The words were simple enough. Thug life. Bold capital letters stretching across his abdomen. But Demetrius had no idea he was about to tattoo a prophecy onto human skin. He had no idea that 5 years later, those exact words would be photographed on a coroner's table in Las Vegas. And he definitely had no idea that the letters spelled out the most profound critique of American society that hip-hop had ever produced. But to understand why a 21-year-old rapper was permanently marking his body with a philosophy that would outlive him, you need to go back 5 years. Back to a classroom in Baltimore. Back to when Tupac Shakur wore tights instead of bandanas. Back to the moment when everything changed. Baltimore School for the Arts, 1987. 17-year-old Tupac Amaru Shakur stood on stage in white ballet tights, his body moving through a perfect grand jeet. The other students applauded. His teacher, Donald Hickens, smiled from the front row. This was Tupac at his happiest. A straight-A student who loved Shakespeare, wrote poetry that made grown men cry, and danced in the Nutcracker every Christmas. "That boy is going to be the greatest actor of his generation," Hicken told his colleagues after class. "Mark my words," Jada Pinkett, Tupac's closest friend at school, agreed. They'd sit on the school steps every afternoon, sharing dreams about Hollywood. Jada wanted to be a movie star. Tupac wanted to be the next Denzel Washington. Both of them believed it was possible. Both of them believed art could save them. But then November 1987 arrived, and with it, an assignment that would crack something open inside Tupac's mind. "Write about injustice," his English teacher announced. "Something you've witnessed. Something real." While white classmates wrote about abstract concepts and distant history, Tupac wrote about walking home from school the previous week. He wrote about being stopped by police for no reason except the color of his skin. He wrote about being thrown against a wall, searched, humiliated. He wrote about his mother, Afeni Shakur, telling him stories of fighting the FBI as a Black Panther. He wrote about rage so deep it had no bottom. When he read his essay aloud, the classroom went silent. Not the good kind of silent. The uncomfortable kind. His teacher's face showed something Tupac had never seen before. Fear. "Very powerful, Tupac," she said carefully. "Very intense." And just like that, 17-year-old Tupac understood. He could be the talented black kid who danced ballet and quoted Shakespeare, but he couldn't be angry. He couldn't remind them that underneath the artistry was a burning fury at everything they represented, everything they'd done to his people. That afternoon, walking home through West Baltimore, Tupac passed corner boys, hustlers, addicts, and working mothers coming home from double shifts. These people were called thugs, criminals, animals. That's what the news called them. That's what politicians called them. That's what white America called them. But Tupac saw something else. He saw people the system had abandoned. He saw children who'd never had a chance. He saw his own future if he wasn't careful. That night, lying in bed in the small apartment he shared with his mother and sister, Tupac couldn't sleep. The word kept spinning in his mind. Thug. They use it like a weapon, he thought. They use it to make us less than human. What if he could take it back? His mother had taught him about reclaiming language. How black activists in the 60s had taken the word black and made it beautiful. How black is beautiful had been revolutionary. What if he could do the same thing with thug? He got up, found a notebook, and started writing in the darkness. He wrote about all the hate he'd seen. all the ways the system crushes poor people, and especially poor black people. He wrote about how children inherit rage, about cycles of violence, about how society creates the very monsters it pretends to fear. Then he wrote it, "The hate you give little infants fucks everybody." He stared at the words. Then he looked at the first letter of each word. T-U-G-I-A-F-I. Tupac's heart started pounding. It was perfect. More than perfect. It was a Molotov cocktail disguised as slang. And nobody would see it coming. But what nobody knew was that this 17-year-old boy sitting in a dark bedroom had just created the philosophy that would define his entire life and predict his death. Within 9 years, those letters would be carved into his stomach, and within 10 years, they'd be on a body in a morgue. By 1992, Tupac had moved to Oakland and his music career had exploded. His debut album, Tupacalypse Now, had made him famous and dangerous. Vice President Dan Quayle publicly called for it to be banned. Police departments across America denounced him. But young people, especially young black people, worshipped him because he said what they felt. The thug life philosophy had been developing in his mind for 5 years. Now he was ready to make it permanent. At Meech's tattoo parlor, the needle touched skin for the first time. Tupac felt the sting and smiled. This was transformation. This was armor. "People are going to see this and think you're glorifying gang life," Meech warned as he worked. "Then I'll explain it," Tupac said, "as many times as it takes," and he did. In every interview, Tupac broke down the acronym. He explained that thug life wasn't about being a criminal. It was about recognizing that the system creates criminals by design. When you deny people education, employment, hope, and humanity, you can't act surprised when they turn to crime. When you give hate to children who never had a chance, that hate grows up and destroys everyone. But hear us what made Tupac's philosophy so dangerous to the establishment. He wasn't just complaining, he was diagnosing. He was showing people exactly how the machine worked. A thug is someone who came from nothing and made something anyway. Tupac explained in a 1993 interview with Arsenio Hall. The system beat you down, called you names, told you you're nothing, and you're supposed to just accept it? No. A thug says, "I'm going to survive anyway. I'm going to thrive anyway." "I'm going to be somebody anyway," the interviewer pushed back. "But doesn't that word have negative connotations?" Tupac's eyes flashed. "That's exactly my point. They gave us that word as an insult. I'm taking it back. Just like the system tries to make us into monsters, we're saying you created this monster. Now you have to deal with it." What confused everyone was the contradiction Tupac embodied. Here was a man who'd studied Shakespeare and ballet, who could discuss Maya Angelou and Machiavelli with equal passion, who wrote poetry that brought people to tears. And he called himself a thug. It was supposed to confuse people. How can you be so educated and call yourself a thug? A reporter demanded at a press conference in 1994. Tupac smiled that dangerous smile. How can a system be so wealthy and create so much poverty? How can a country talk about freedom and lock up more people than any other nation on earth? My contradictions are just a reflection of America's contradictions. The Thug Life tattoo became iconic almost immediately. Fans would point to their own stomachs at concerts, mimicking Tupac's gesture of lifting his shirt. It appeared in music videos, on album covers, in photographs. It became as recognizable as his face. But more than that, it became a movement. Tupac started a rap group called Thug Life, released an album, and even tried to create a formal code. The Thug Life Code included rules designed to reduce gang violence. No selling drugs to pregnant women or kids. Keeping children out of conflicts, respecting territory to prevent turf wars. "I'm trying to get gangsters to have some kind of code," Tupac told Vibe magazine. "I'm trying to get them to see we're killing each other over nothing. The real enemies are the people who created these conditions." It was revolutionary. A street philosophy with structure. A way to take the chaos and give it meaning. Not everyone understood. Critics accused him of promoting violence while preaching peace. Some in the black community felt he was reinforcing stereotypes. His mother, Afeni, worried. She understood what he was trying to do, but she'd seen how America destroyed black revolutionaries. Baby, I understand, she told him in 1994. But I'm scared they'll use this word against you. Tupac hugged his mother. Mama, they were going to call me a criminal anyway. At least this way, I'm controlling the narrative, and that was the heart of it. Tupac knew that as a young black man in America, he'd be labeled a thug whether he wanted it or not. So instead of running from the label, he grabbed it with both hands and said, "This is mine now, and I decide what it means." The irony was that Tupac's thug persona was only one part of who he was. The same man who rapped about violence also wrote Dear Mama, one of the most tender tributes to motherhood in music history. The same man who flashed his Thug Life tattoo also wrote Keep Your Head Up, a feminist anthem. The same man who seemed to embody gangster rap quoted Shakespeare in interviews and discussed philosophy. "I'm not saying I'm going to change the world," Tupac said in one of his most famous interviews, "but I guarantee that I will spark the brain that will change the world." In his final years, the Thug Life philosophy became both shield and target, and made him invincible and vulnerable. People who understood saw him as a prophet. People who didn't saw him as everything wrong with hip-hop. Then November 30th, 1994 happened. Quad Studios in New York. 5 bullets tore through Tupac's body. He survived, but something changed. The violence he'd been predicting, the hate the system had given him, had literally tried to kill him. From prison in 1995, after a sexual abuse conviction, he released Me Against the World. The title itself was pure thug life philosophy, him against a world that wanted him dead before he was born. When Suge Knight bailed him out for $1.4 million, Tupac's transformation was complete. He shaved his head, got more tattoos, became even more aggressive. But the thug life tattoo remained the original mark, the foundation. September 7th, 1996, Las Vegas. After a Mike Tyson fight, Tupac got into a BMW driven by Suge Knight. At 11:15 p.m., at a red light on Flamingo Road, a white Cadillac pulled up alongside them. 4 bullets hit Tupac, 2 in the chest, 1 in the arm, 1 in the thigh. 6 days later, on September 13th, he died. The Thug Life tattoo died with him. But the philosophy didn't. In the years after his death, the phrase spread far beyond hip-hop. It appeared in academic papers about systemic racism and cyclical poverty. Activists used it to explain generational trauma. Educators used it to discuss the school-to-prison pipeline. In 2017, author Angie Thomas published a novel titled The Hate You Give, taking the title directly from Tupac's acronym. The book became a massive bestseller and a film, introducing a new generation to the philosophy. Teachers use it in classrooms today. Activists invoke it at protests. Scholars cite it in papers. The tattoo that Tupac got in Oakland in 1992 has become a foundational text in discussions about race and inequality in America. What's remarkable is how prophetic it was. Tupac saw with perfect clarity how the system works, how poverty and racism create conditions that breed violence, how that violence is then used to justify more oppression. He understood the cycle decades before it became mainstream discourse. And he understood that words matter. By taking thug, a word designed to dehumanize black men, and transforming it into an acronym that explained systemic oppression, he performed linguistic warfare. He turned the weapon back on his attackers. That's why, even now, young people lift their shirts mimicking Tupac's gesture. That's why Thug Life transcended music. That's why his philosophy, born in a Baltimore bedroom when he was 17, still resonates today, because the hate keeps being given. Little infants keep receiving it, and it keeps fucking everybody. The tattoo is gone, cremated with Tupac's body, but the philosophy lives on, spreading like the very cycle it describes. Every time someone explains systemic racism, every time a teacher talks about how zip codes determine outcomes, every time someone recognizes that violence in our streets is a symptom, not a cause, they're invoking Tupac's philosophy. In the end, Thug Life wasn't about being a criminal. It was about refusing to be a victim. It was about taking the hatred the world gives you and transforming it into power. Into art, into revolution. Tupac Shakur was a rapper, actor, poet, and revolutionary, but more than anything, he was a teacher. And thug life was his most important lesson, written in permanent ink for the world to see. The hate they gave him did fuck everybody. It took one of the most talented artists of his generation and buried him at 25. But it also created something bulletproof, an idea. And ideas, as Tupac knew, live forever. Just like thug life.